Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Rachel. What's going on?
Not much. What you got for me this week?
Rachel, so here's what I want to talk about today. You ready for this? I want to talk about CRAAP.
Wow. Who knew this was what I was going to start my morning off with?
So here's why I want to talk about CRAAP. I was watching a TikTok recently where it was a segment of a presentation that I don't know who it was. You know how you flip through social media and you're like, oh, well, this is interesting. And then your thumb stops and hovers and you'd actually watch the video before your thumb moves on and swipes up again, right? And it was of two presenters talking about how that AI has grown so quickly that hackers and scam artists have learned how to use it to take 3 seconds of audio of somebody's voice and then use the AI to replicate that voice. You've probably seen things in the media where, images of people have been faked, and now that sort of led them to conjecture about how voices could be faked, and as a public service announcement to families, sort of like talking to kids about safe words. Like in our family, you're going to really know it's dad that's calling you, because if you ever start to question it, you could say this word and it's only this word that we might know about. And they were talking about like these protections that because the technology had advanced, that there'll be new scams to watch out for. And that all led me to, how do you detect what's true and what's not true? And that we talk about in our presentations, like what evidence-based practices, and people have listened to the podcast know we've talked about that before, but it's a thing that we talk about is how can you verify information? And so when I say what I really would like to talk about today is CRAAP, what I really mean is that there was an acronym created by the University of California. No, I guess it's California State University, librarians there. I think maybe it was one librarian, but maybe it was one librarian that sort of spearheaded the initiative and others helped develop it together. I think Sarah Blacksley is the name of the person that either spearheaded the organization or the development of this acronym that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So CRAAP. And what this is again, librarians trying to educate the populace about being a good digital citizen and to verify the information that you're hearing in the same way that these guys that I let my thumb hover over on that we're talking about, the turning audio into faking someone's voice. How would you verify, right? And so the test is called the CRAAP test, right? So let's talk about each one, right? So currency. How current is the information that you're consuming? Is it something that was put out in, the 1800s, or have we've got new evidence that supports this and it continues to support it? Or is it brand new, right? Asking yourself the question of when was the information published or when was it posted? Has it been revised and updated? I think we see this in blog posts sometimes. Certainly, I know from publishing books that it's like, is this the final version of whatever I'm publishing? Or if you read a blog post, here's the article, and then underneath it, there's actually this was updated, blah, 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 on this date, so that there's reiterations of whatever you published. Meaning, is there ever a final published date of anything? Or is it just the current, you're reading the current version of it, And then, does it contain contemporary current information, or is it old information? So not just when was it published, but is there other information out there that that would grow upon that to know that this is current? So let's just stop there. And what do you think? What are you thinking about the CRAAP test, and what are you thinking about the question of how current the information is that we're consuming?
I think this is a really good framework to think about. I think part of the challenge is we're all getting information from so many different sources. So it used to be okay, books and the newspaper. And now it's just with online media, there's so many different ways to get information. And I think a lot of people are using ways that you don't know. You don't know how up to date and current something is, when someone's sharing something with you, which, I think that we just have to kind of go back to what we learned in graduate school, if you're an SLP, and think about like, how do we know what to believe and what are the sources that we're using to consume, this information. So I think generally speaking, that's something that came up for me was like, yeah, like current, but like, I don't know if this person that I follow on TikTok is sharing with me the most current, updated information. And sometimes I even question myself. I'm like, like there's some slides in some of my presentations. I'm like, is this the most current? When you're doing a presentation and you've had it for a while, it's like, you have to kind of make a point to go through and say like, like I should look into this. Like, is this the most recent? So I think it's just something that is a little bit harder to kind of keep up on sometimes, or even understand how current is this.
Well, and that's why I kind of like this test, is that it gives you a framework by which to follow to answer those sorts of questions, because you might not even be thinking about the currency of what I'm watching on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or wherever you're getting your information. But now, if you follow this sort of CRAAP test, well, okay, I should be asking that question of myself before, how current is this information, before sort of letting it become part of my practice, become part of my thinking. It helps you. The framework helps you ask questions like, the next thing in the CRAAP test is, how relevant is this to meet my needs? And that, I feel like, is another thing that we should be asking, or be thinking about at least, when it comes to the information we're consuming through social media and beyond, is sometimes information is all about giving you ideas you didn't know you needed. And other times it's, I'm actually on a hunt. I've asked a specific question, and now I'm going to go see if I can verify that, and maybe I've answered that question and I'm verifying that answer, or I am asking a question and I'm seeking information to answer it. And so that brings us to that second. There's the C, currency, and then the R, how relevant is it to whatever I'm searching for?
Chris, I have a question for you, and I legitimately don't know the answer to this. And I think you know more about AI stuff than I do. I feel like, because I think this comes up when we're using things like ChatGPT, right? It's like, how accurate and relevant and current is the information that it's kind of spewing out to me? So I guess my question is like, I heard on the interwebs, like it's not, and ChatGPT is the example, right? It's only current up until a certain point of time.
Yes.
Can you help me?
Sure. Well, ChatGPT, it says right on the website that they pulled information up to a certain point. I forget what date it was. It might be like some data in 2021, and it doesn't currently talk to the internet. And it might matter on what version you are, because there's this ChatGPT 4 that you can pay for. But that particular tool does not talk to the internet. It's pulling from a large language model that it's drawing from. That doesn't mean all AI. Some does talk to the internet and is getting some current information. So what I think maybe what we are getting at here is that depending on the tool you're using, you should know where it's coming from, right? Know that if it's some tools talk to the internet and some don't, so it might be giving me skewed information. And certainly something else that I think came out when I was talking to Bruce Alter through that interview here on the podcast was, when you're starting to play with these AI tools, especially looking for information, start with stuff that you know about, so that you can see how the AI might create what the people in AI are calling hallucinations. Like, they're sort of close. It's right. It's a mirage, right? Like yeah, it's 90% accurate. And the way I equate that too is, anytime someone has like interviewed me for something, and then they have put together an article about what I say, or they put an article about, and I'm one contributor to that they've interviewed, and they've interviewed 6 other people, usually it's about 90% accurate. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't say that. You twisted it in a certain way. And if I could go back and put my little stamp on it, I would say it this way or a little differently. And that seems to be true with AI too, that it's mostly accurate. So again, where's the information coming from? How current is it? And then how relevant is it?
I think that makes sense. I definitely have done that with the different AI tools that I've explored, is starting with something that I really understand, because I'm like, how accurate is this? Like, it's kind of like, I want to make sure that it understands something that I understand really well. Like, how does it represent that? And so I think that's a good strategy for people to think about. I don't know. I would have a hard time going in, even with we'll use again ChatGPT as an example. Not knowing about something, I would have a hard time trusting like whatever it spits out, because yeah, it could say anything, but if I don't know, then I feel really nervous to just allow whatever it spits out to be my truth, right?
Well, I think that brings us to the next 2, which are the authority and accuracy. Let's just talk about those together. This is why it's CRAAP, right? Is that chances are you don't want to take information just from one source. You want multiple authorities, so you're verifying it from different angles. I think that's what my librarian friends would say, is how they share being a good digital citizen for yourself is to make sure you're verifying your information from multiple sources. That's how you can make sure, and multiple authorities on the sources. So ask yourself questions like, who published this? What are their credentials? What are they getting out of it? Are they qualified? And then, can I verify that from different places? Because if I can, then chances are it's accurate.
Yes, I like that. That makes perfect sense.
And then the P, of course, just to wrap us up here, is what's the purpose? Meaning, why did the author publish this? What are they getting out of this? Are they getting money out of this? Are they getting fame out of this? Are they getting, why did they decide to publish this in the first place? Is it clear? We're asked when we're presenting to state our financial relationships and our non-financial relationships. So we always disclose that kind of stuff. Is it clear what the purpose is by the whoever presented that information, or is it it should be transparent, or is it actually more a little translucent? And if it's a little bit cloudy, that should maybe give you a little bit lower score on that CRAAP test.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because so often, especially on the internet, you're seeing all of these pieces of information and all these approaches that you should know about and ways to do something that you don't know about yet. And I think that the finances and where people are getting their finances and why they're sharing certain information is something to just really consider and think about.
Yeah, sometimes it's not direct either. There might be an indirect relationship that's happening. So again, the whole framework can help you really verify information. And I feel like it's something we need to help more clinicians, more parents, everyone understand and think through as we continue to navigate our way through the world of, like you said, well, I heard on the internet, So with that in mind, here's the challenge. I have a challenge for our listeners. What we have coming up with the rest of the episode, this is a Small Talks episode. We've got a bunch of people that we've interviewed before and then graciously said, hey, stick around. Let's chat about something that you're passionate about, or give us a tool or a strategy or something that you want to share. And so use the CRAAP test throughout the Small Talks episode, listening to what Darla Ashton has to say about visual schedules, what Hank Poore has to talk about turning on speaking after each word. We have a little brief discussion about that. Our friend Sean Sweeney, remember when we interviewed him, talking about Jamboard and role-playing games? We talk to Shelley Anderson about learners giving commands, and then as opposed to just following commands. And then Tami Altschuler talking about what every school SLP should know about working in a hospital setting. Anything else before we go into the rest of the episode, Rachel?
No, Chris, I think we're ready to head into the interview. Do you love this podcast? We would love for you to take a second and leave us a review on iTunes. That way, more people can find this podcast and learn how to support individuals using AAC. We also love hearing from our listeners. It reminds us that all of the hard work we put into this podcast really matters. And don't forget to subscribe so you always know when we release new podcasts. Now let's head back into the episode.
I'd like to welcome back to the show, Darla Ashton. How's it going, Darla?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Darla, you and I, we're going to do a quick hit here. We're going to talk about visual schedules. You're putting together a presentation on visual schedules. What's that about?
Yeah. So just over the last year or two, I've been in a couple of different situations. I work as a BCBA in my school district. So I get called out when kids are, kind of going through a tough time, and we need to kind of sit down and collaborate as a team and think about ways we can work through some of those behaviors. And a lot of times those are tied to communication barriers that the student is having. But one of the things that we keep circling back to, one of the first things you can put in place that I think is pretty simple to put in place that makes all the difference in the world is a picture schedule, some sort of visual schedule for the student to work through from the day. So because it's been just so really impactful with a couple of kids I've worked with over the last 2 years, I just decided to start putting together this presentation and getting out there and talking about it.
All right, so let's hear about it. What tools are you using? What do your visual schedules look like? And what I'm most curious about, have you heard of an amorphous visual schedule?
Amorphous visual schedule?
All right, I got something to share, but you go
You're
first.
Going to have to teach me about that. Again, like a visual schedule, I think it's really simple. And I think sometimes people get a little trapped or, have a hard time working. They think it's going to be all this work. They think it's going to take so much time. How do I teach it? And I always say, just start, just make it and start. And there's lots of different ways to make them now. Like, it's so much easier than it even used to be. I know that I am personally using Lesson Picks to create mine. Lesson Picks, such a cheap, awesome resource that is a great way to put together tons of different visual supports, but they have already built in, what's the word I'm looking for? They're already built in where you just pump in the picture symbols and it's just putting together the schedule for you. I'm actually setting that up with an early childhood classroom right now. They've got a couple of kids that are really experiencing some behaviors. And the teacher has a flow in her schedule of what she knows is going to happen, but the kids have no way of knowing what's going to happen. So we got on Lesson Picks. We looked at all the different versions of picture symbol or picture schedules that there are. We printed a bunch off and we're letting the kids pick which one they want. So there are some with rainbows and there are some with trains, and every kid gets to pick theirs. They get to color it. And now everything is permanent in their mind, right? What's going to happen next. So that's the beauty of a picture schedule is, and we as adults use them all the time. When we go into a meeting, I want an agenda. I want to see how long everything's going to last. And it's no different for our kids in the classroom, whether they're verbal, nonverbal, whatever their abilities are.
I love the idea of having a couple templates and inviting the learners themselves to choose the template that resonates with them and then create it. That builds that ownership so that they own it, so that this is theirs. And they're, rather than it imposed on them, you're going to use this and I picked it and we're all using the exact same thing. That totally respects them. And it really is it's a move towards universal design for learning with that flexibility in mind. I love it.
Yeah, UDL. So that's the other thing that, we talk about. If you've got one kid in the classroom that is struggling, that kind of needs to see that reminder of what's next, chances are all of your kids in your classroom are going to benefit from it. So, sometimes you'll hear like, I just haven't had time to sit and do that for that one kid. If you started off your year and had it all created for every kid, even if all of the kids in your classroom didn't necessarily have to have it to be successful, think about that one kid that does need it And now they have got all of these models around them all day long that are showing them how to move through that schedule and how it works. So it's not all on the adults to do all the work. All of a sudden you've got, maybe 10 little bodies in the room that are teaching that kid how to do it. And we know that that peer modeling piece is such an impactful evidence-based practice. Why not lean on it and let the peers teach it rather than you?
I love that. I guess, again, I love that so much. And it's really a lifelong skill. I mean, if you think about your calendar is just a visual schedule, right? Of what you're going to do every day. Okay, I got this meeting at 3:00. I better contact, I got this meeting at 6, oh, I'm going to the dentist on this day, but it's a schedule. It's a visual schedule, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And okay, so one more. So I've got to give a plug also to the app on the iPad, ChoiceWorks.
Okay.
That is one of my very favorite visual schedule tools to use also. It's super easy, it's super intuitive to use. And for teachers, I've had teachers come to me sometimes and say, oh my gosh, I don't have time to go and print off all the pictures and Velcro and laminate. That ChoiceWorks app is very affordable, and it gives you a really easy, instant way to pull up picture symbols and stuff them into a schedule and be ready to go. And I don't know how many times I've been in a situation where there's been a change in a schedule, or something unexpected is going to happen during the day, or I've got a kid who's really struggling with a task in the classroom and I need just to come up with a really quick task analysis to get them through it. And that app comes with even like reinforcers that you can put at the end of the schedule, and it comes with timers to show, we have to get through this language arts instruction, but we're only going to do it for 10 minutes. And when this timer is over, we're going to move on to the next piece. Whether we're finished or not, we're moving on to our schedule. They let you put in videos. So it's just a nice, easy, very successful resource that I feel like once I've got a teacher who starts to use it, they want to use it with everybody.
So that idea that something unexpected might pop up is exactly where the idea of an amorphous visual schedule comes from. So what all that is when you say to a teacher a visual schedule, they often think of the final product, which is usually linear, right? It's either horizontal or vertical,
Yes.
and things go in an order, right? But amorphous means like there's no order. So just picture all those symbols kind of smattered around. There's still a linear opponent; those are just blank, right? And then the learner puts things in order. And then in that sort of space where all these pictures are, there's a couple question marks that are always present. So when that something unexpected happens, you're not locked in, meaning if someone had just done the linear visual schedule and suddenly there's a fire alarm goes off and we have to leave, or the power goes out, or there's always a billion things that might come up that are unexpected. But that's not what my schedule says, because it's next, some kids who are learning to be more flexible and are really hyper-focused on, but that's what says this next, and that could really impact their day in a negative way. This gives them that flexibility. Well, see, we learned, question mark goes here, something unexpected happened, and we can teach that by building in. It's kind of the fun part of teaching is we can always make unexpected things happen. Like, whoops, my chair fell over. Oh no, Miss Ashton's garbage can fell over and the stuff filled out. Oh no, that's something unexpected. Let's go put it up there, so that you build in that there's something unexpected.
Yeah, because you're right. Like so many of these kids are such concrete thinkers. And I think sometimes we get stuck in the track of we'll teach what unexpected means when something really unexpected happens. And I just had this conversation with the team today about how we need to be purposeful and drill a skill that we are learning, not when it happens in the moment and emotions are heightened, but when we're in a calm state, when we're in our upstairs brain. And there are lots of things that we can do as instructors to kind of facilitate that and teach it in a calm moment so that when the real event happens, we are ready to go.
We are prepared. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking about visual schedules and for ChoiceWorks to mentioning that particular tool and lesson picks. Sounds like you're having a great time with visual schedules. Good luck with your presentation. You're doing a presentation for up in New Hampshire. Is that, do I have it right?
I think it is for New Hampshire. Yeah. Mike Murata's asked me to come on and talk with some people. So I'm super psyched about that. And so fun to come on here again and talk about it.
I'm sure it's going to go great. Thanks, Darla.
Thanks, Chris.
I'd like to welcome back to the podcast, Hank Poore. How's it going, Hank? Yeah. So Hank, when we were recording our episode and when I met you in Alabama, a story that happened to me came to my mind, and I would love to get your impressions or ask your why you chose or why you choose the thing you chose. Okay, so here's the story. Gosh, it's probably 10 years ago now. I was invited by a very famous person in the field of AAC. His name was Bruce Baker. He was the person who developed MinSpeak and the Unity system that the PRC uses. And I know you're a Tobii Dynavox user, right? But these is like the Coke and Pepsi of AAC are these two companies, right? And so he's the developer of the competition. And he invites me to go to Australia and speak with him. And he's going to speak about how he developed the AAC system and how it works. And I'm going to talk about implementation, how we actually use it in school and teach it. Okay. So we go to Australia together, and there he's meeting all sorts of AAC users. Like, he developed the system they're using, right? He's the guy. So, and I'm sure there was more than just him, but he's really the one that's really the principal person. So there's all these AAC users that use his system. They come up to him and they chat with him, and he has conversations with them. And of course, he's met many AAC users throughout his many years in the field, right? And something that the one AAC user, he was talking to an AAC user once, I forget what city we were in, and he says, I notice, whatever this guy's name was, I can't remember, I noticed that you don't use the word, you don't turn on the feature of speak after every word. You're waiting to the end to formulate the entire thing and then hit the speak button. And I noticed, Hank, you do that same thing when you and I are conversing. And Bruce said to this guy, he said, hey, you should know that many of the AAC users that I work with and that have reported to me is that they suggest to other AAC users to turn on that speak display. And when I say turn it on, what I mean is turn on the speak after every word so that it keeps the communication partner longer. And there might even be some research, I might be making this up, Hank, about trying to, how many turns it takes, like how to extend how many turns an AAC user and a communication partner might have together, that it might go longer if you turn on the speak after every word, so that the communication partner hears it twice. They're hearing each word as you formulate it, and then they're hearing the entire message at the end. So like I said, I noticed that you don't do that. You've chosen not to turn on every word. And I'm just curious if you feel comfortable talking about it. Yeah. How did you make that decision to turn that feature off or to turn it on? Do you notice things when you're at the bar or because you work at a bar and you work at a restaurant, and you had mentioned in your interview about going out to different stores and engaging with people? Is that a consideration for you? How do you decide? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if you know Karen Baggett, but we were with each other, and she is a longtime friend of mine. And she got on to me and said that I should turn it on. And I have been meaning to turn it on, but forgot about it until now. Also, you can put this in the podcast.
Thanks, Hank. All right, we will definitely put it in the podcast. Yeah, I think, I was thinking about it, Hank, though. I was thinking it's probably personal preference in the same way that, the voice and the rate, that, there's certain things that you just choose because you like it a certain way, right? Yeah. But I do think he had a point that, and I don't know Karen, but it makes sense to me that you're at the restaurant and I know the Tobii Dynavox that you use, it has a display on both sides, right? So even if I couldn't read, I would know you're formulating something. But at the restaurant or at the bar, you might get somebody who has a visual impairment and wouldn't necessarily see. They might say something and not know, but they could then hear each word and know, okay, this guy's formulating something, So yeah, if there's not a downside, you don't see a downside to turning it on?
No.
I wonder what happens. I would love to, if you turn it on, let's catch up at ATIA, and I'd love to hear your feedback about how that, what you noticed when you turned that on.
Yeah. Mm. 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 Mm.
Yes, I'm about to turn it on after this, and if I don't find it annoying, I will have it on at the conference.
Okay. Well, then it totally makes sense that you could find it annoying, and that's why you turn it off. And I guess there's maybe certain situations and circumstances where you'd want it on, and other circumstances where you'd want it off, right? So it's not an all or nothing thing. You can turn it on or off when you need it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Hank, thank you so much for spending the time with me on the podcast, both for the main interview, the entire interview, the entire episode, and for this Small Talks episode. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Hank. Thank you so much. All right, you take it easy. We'd like to welcome back to the podcast Sean Sweeney. Sean, how's it going?
Very well today. Thank you very much. How about you?
Excellent. So you're going to share a little bit about Jamboard. Tell us how you're using Jamboard.
I have written about Jamboard on my blog periodically through the pandemic because it came out like just before, and it gave everyone this like really easy way to interact with a group, of students and get them to contribute to a shared space in a way that's, much easier than say like a Google Slides, because there's just limited controls, and limited ways to add, but you can sketch, you can add text, you can search for an image and add it. And I think one way that you'll really dig, Chris, is lately I've been trying to modify a role-playing game. And I found just through searching and looking for, simpler, free or almost free role-playing games. And I found one that's called Movie Night. And it's supposed to be based on sort of like the genre of like Stranger Things, what Stranger Things like draws from, like your Goonies, your E.T., or you can make whatever you want out of it. But the actual game kind of outlines in like a very simple way how you would play and set up scenes where there's a challenge that people roll a dice against. And based on some of your character attributes and gear, you might move past the challenge, or you might not have solved the challenge and the story continues. But I think for our students, there's a lot of language in a game like that. So for Jamboard, I've been having them design characters in Jamboard and then writing, what's your choice on, what are your character attributes? And it does use words in the game, that you might want to modify if you care, like geek and nerd, but it uses those in positive ways. And I think that I've always had ownership of those words. I'm fine with those words. And it demonstrates your smarts. And another thing that we did was we went outside, because I've been trying to bring students outside where we can now that it's warm, and we kind of designed our setting collaboratively with chalk on the ground. And we decided, well, there would be a military base and a lab, but also like the docks, like in the Goonies, it's a coastal town, and maybe woods, and the students sketched them. And then I just, we quickly put that into Jamboard so that we'd have our setting. And so I'm kind of working on this and moving along with it, but I'm thinking of laying out like the story circumstance in Jamboard, and then what their role is, role of the die, and so forth. And I think it can be great for that sort of thing of making the language of role-playing games, which is very extensive, into a more visual resource. But there's lots of resources on Jamboard that are out there. I sometimes just use it as a blank slate, something everyone should know about.
Yeah, because it's like a virtual whiteboard, right? But then like you said, you can change the different backgrounds. You can bring images and make them the backgrounds. So like that. And I want to immediately hop in my car and come up to the Boston area and play in this game with you, right? Because it sounds so fun. You're right. Role-playing games are right up my alley. I have a Dungeons and Dragons room in my house, because I see the power of it, right? Of the storytelling and the attributes and doing like describing all the language that you put into it. And I know you do a lot of work in the social pragmatic area too, right? So here's a safe place to practice, like making a mistake. Your character can make a mistake and do something wrong, and then you can say, okay, let's talk about that. Is that in real life? How would you change it? So I think there's just a lot of power in that, and taking the role-playing game and meshing it with Jamboard, smashing those things together. That sounds awesome. So thanks you for sharing that.
No problem. It really wasn't my original idea. I worked with a graduate student early pandemic, and I had this Indiana Jones role-playing game I wanted to kind of modify to make useful. And I was thinking more of the Google Slides realm. And my graduate student, he's a gamer, and he sketched a whole scene with Indy and Marion trying to cross a ravine on a rickety bridge, and the students put in like dialogue with the Post-its from Jamboard, and it just went in a direction that I hadn't even thought of. And that speaks to work with graduate students as well. It's going to benefit you as much as it will benefit them, I think.
Yeah, fresh ideas for sure. Awesome. Well, maybe it's work with gamers. That's
yes, both. Yes. No, I have a graduate student now, and she was just saying she's a competitive Settlers of Catan player, and I'm like, I've seen that online version so many times and thought I should learn this. Now I will learn it from you. So please do. But I wanted to mention too that Julia Dweck. She has a link tree of a bunch of Jamboards that people should look at. If you look up Julia Dweck's link tree, and she has a lot of Jamboard templates, and she has a place that you can buy her a coffee because of all the things that she's made. She has a lot of very play-based, she's puzzle-based ones, which are kind of more math, and like play-based ones that I highly recommend if you just want to get started. And you could just click on them. They copy it right to your Jamboard, which is in your Google, of course. I didn't mention that before, but Jamboard's part of Google, and then you can go from there. And there's so much we could do with it.
Awesome. We'll make sure we have it in the show notes. Thanks so much, Sean. I'd like to welcome back to the show Shelley Anderson. Shelley, how's it going?
It's going good, Chris.
Thanks for coming back. So tell us about, I don't know, some strategy or some story that you've used, again, that maybe integrates music into teaching some sort of concept.
Yeah, so something my students have really been enjoying is taking a gathering drum that are those really big, round, they're short, they sit on the floor, they're loud and deep drums. And then wooden frogs that has a stick it goes with. And when you scrape its back, it sounds like it's croaking, or you could tap it. And this is one of my kiddos' favorite things. He always requests the wooden frog. It was one of the first things he learned on the device in music. So it was so motivating for him. And he just likes to hop it around. And so sometimes the frog will like watch him learn something in a book, or sometimes the frog is how we teach the language around it. So the frog, oh, he's sleepy. He's so sleepy. And so I'll model sleep on the device, and then I'll put him under the drum. And then next turn, the child is the controller of the frog, and I'm the controller of the drum. And so they have to tell me in the drum, or under the drum, or around the drum, and use their device for all of that. And I can't tell you how motivating this is. He loves it so much. And it's simple musical instruments that you could pick up somewhere, a drum and a frog, and the frog does all kinds of things. He's a cool frog.
Yeah, but chances are they're probably down in the music room of most schools, right? If you didn't have those, you could make something similar, right? I mean, you could take something, go on a hunt to go find a stick and something that you can scrape it on to make a croaking sound, and then you build a little frog out of tape or something, right? I mean, whatever, just stuff you have in your room, you could make a frog. Heck, you could make it out of cardboard if you needed to, right? But so you could make the materials if you don't have them. Don't let that stand in your way. Well, I guess I don't have a drum and a frog, I can't do this. No, wait, it's not really about the drum and the frog so much as it's about him being in control and telling you what to do, right? That's what I'm hearing. Yes. Is he's giving you commands and you're following his commands. That sounds so much fun. I want to come play. I want to be there with the frog and the drum, and because it sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Come join us and you can be the blue frog.
I'd like to welcome back Tami Altschuler to the podcast. Welcome back, Tami. So, Tami, you and I were chatting after our recording, and we got talking about the baton passing of a school speech language pathologist who might be working with a client with AAC, and then that client needs to go to the hospital, or vice versa. Someone's in the hospital and then goes back into the school setting. So, with that exchange in mind, where you're sharing the care of a person, or maybe if not sharing, you're transferring the care. What's something you wish every speech language pathologist in a school knew about your work in the hospital setting?
Yeah, I wish we can partner a bit more. And so I would hope that a school-based speech pathologist, if they know the child is going into the hospital for a certain procedure or surgery, and I'll use getting a trach placed, a breathing tube placed as the example. First, preparing the child as best you can for what that is, what a trach looks like. We have these little teddy bears that have trachs, and they could touch it and feel it, and then also see it, because representation, we know, matters as well. But just using that augmented input to teach a child and prepare them for this. Another thing is teaching them the vocabulary for a trach. And so with a trach comes secretions and the need for suctioning. And if the child understands that vocabulary and they have it programmed into their communication devices, then immediately post-operatively, they're able to request those basic things that they need to help them along with that care afterwards. And then the last thing would be to just prepare the child for what an experience this would be. It's really scary to be in a hospital. It's really scary to get a breathing tube and to even have to use this whole new vocabulary that goes with it. But maybe preparing the child, again, with that augmented input for what this could look like, and also how they'll be able to participate in activities afterwards. And that's a lot of questions that I get from our patients is, can I go swimming? Can I ride my bike? Can I do all of these things that I was able to do before? And so using that opportunity and that time to just help them understand what life looks like after a trach is placed.
It doesn't sound like you get a lot of opportunity to do some pre-teaching. It sounds like your involvement might happen after post-operation. Is that fair? Meaning your involvement in the hospital setting.
That's fair to say, but I'm really working hard to change that and really teaming more with our ENTs and our pulmonologists on preoperative planning and teaching. We have that model more in the adult world for when someone gets a total laryngectomy, their vocal cords are out and they're unable to speak. That's usually a very elective procedure and known a little in advance as the disease progresses. And so I would love to see that as well in the pediatric world, and a child coming in from a school system, and they know sometimes a trach is an emergent procedure and there's no preparing anyone for it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we know that if a child has a progressive disease process, that they're eventually going to need this trach, and that we can prepare them as best as possible.
And so we can use all the same strategies we know and love in our school setting by reading stories and watching little videos and just basically doing, like I said, what teachers do is we're going to prepare you for life. So here's some things you should know that's coming up to remove that fear. Here's things you can expect. And do you know if there is any again, this seems like an opportunity for a speech language pathologist to create books like this, to have a resources for this. Do you know if there's any resources offhand that you'd be like, yeah, you should go check out this?
I don't know of it. And it's funny you ask, because I had a patient a few years ago, a teenager who was getting a trach placed, and she already had difficulty speaking and would sometimes speak, but sometimes use an AAC device, very multimodality communication. And her family realized that the picture symbols on her device were all of people who didn't have a trach. And so they were asking me, don't you have symbols of someone who has a trach? Oh my goodness, no, I don't. And so they have a hookup. They have a family friend who's a graphic designer, and they ask them to create a whole new symbol set to include, again, representation, to include someone who has a trach placed. So we need more.
Yeah, well, I know that there are app developers listening to this podcast. So app developers, if you're listening, there you go. Do we have representation of people who are using trachs? And then the last thing that I will say there, Tami, is that we have a couple episodes ago, a while ago now, we had a high school senior who came on and was doing her capstone project on AAC. And again, this sounds like an opportunity to me. Is like, if there's not enough resources or materials out there about how to prepare children for different things that might impact their communication post-surgery, well, we have so many kids that are interested in getting in these fields at a high school level who could work with you or other speech language pathologists working in a hospital setting that can kind of educate that, again, the pre-service model, right? Get them in high school so that they get interested in this profession. They create something that's an actual resource that can be used by actual people in the field. That sounds like a win to me. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, because I have all these grand ideas of what we need, but I don't have the talents like creativity and artistry and all of these things to make it happen. So we need to team together.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this, feel free to reach out to us on the Talking with Tech podcast, or me, Chris Bouguet, or Tami Altschuler, and we will work with your student to help create something like this. Tami, is that fair?
Absolutely. Yes. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks again for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.